My name is Courtney Colson, a female to male to female detransitioner, and on this channel we try to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. On this episode, why do so many autistic people transition? And autism is something that I've discussed here and there on this channel, and I'll have to go into it more now because it's been a while, but there's a theory, not mine specifically, it's kind of been thrown around the community, that there's about 3 major reasons why people transition, why they experience gender dysphoria. And the first 2 reasons are autoheterosexuality. Essentially, it's a fetish that you're attracted to the idea of yourself as the opposite sex. The second reason is homosexuality, that it's so much easier to go through the world as the opposite sex if you're attracted to your own biological sex. If you're gay, it would be easier if you were a woman. If you were a lesbian, it would be easier if you were a man. And I can relate to those reasons. And, well, at one point, I'm quite certain I was autistic, which is a controversial thing to say. And the last video I did on this was many years ago, and it was very controversial. I used to be autistic. Well, how is that possible? It's supposed to be a lifelong condition, isn't it? It's your whole identity. That's what the cult of autism has thrown out there. But I can say quite definitively, and if you've watched this channel, you've seen me evolve and go from quite autistic in terms of my personality and the way I communicate and thinking to what I am now. But essentially, I can relate to everything in that Venn diagram of autism, autoheterosexuality, and homosexuality. And all these reasons why I didn't and still continue to not feel quite right in my body. So, talking about autism, just stepping back, the overview of it before we get into the whole transgender side. It's become, in these past 10 years or so, this cult of autism, this neurodiversity, which I fell for at the time. I was even on an autism podcast. It was about autism, autistic representations in the media. And my co-host was big into the neurodiversity thing. Or we hated Autism Speaks. We would discuss it, the idea of a cure for autism. And, back then, because I didn't know any other way of being or thinking, I thought, well, yeah, why do I need a cure? I like being the way I am, but now I've detransitioned, and maybe the hormones, or changing my hormones, or changing my diet, whatever it was, totally changed the way I thought, and I lost all of the sensory issues, all of the social issues associated with autism. And so now I can think clearly. And it's night and day. I can translate between the two people, the neurodiverse and the neurotypical people. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do today. But even though I no longer have any of the issues related to autism, I do still have people hurling that accusation at me going, well, it's more like a personality type, or, the whole neurodiversity thing is, that it isn't a disease or a problem. It's not pathological. Whereas, well, see, I think what they've done now is even worse than that. So instead of pathologizing normal human behavior, which is what I hate about the whole trans movement, where it very much pathologizes things that are normal with everyone. Everyone is a little bit genderqueer. No one 100% fits into the gender stereotypes. But autism kind of does the opposite, which is also bad, where it's trying to turn pathology into personality. So, pathologizing normal behavior, or turning pathology into personality. I'm going to repeat those because talking about spectrums, that is the 2 extremes of this spectrum, where we are not treating these conditions with the severity that they need, and making them fashionable, unintentionally or maybe intentionally. We're in a situation now where autism and ADHD or gender dysphoria are fashionable. It's so strange, and this really did only emerge in the past 10, maybe 15 years. But I mean, let's step back and go, well, so what is autism? Let's just cover the basics there. Autism is a sensory and social disorder, a neurological disorder, and there's been various tests, and supposedly there are structural differences between the autistic and neurotypical brain. But there's nothing super definitive. There's no test to just say, yes, this person's definitely on the autism spectrum. But, I mean, you look at severely autistic people, and yeah, I am not going to argue with that. There is a retardation there, and that word is not a bad word. Retard is just, it was a medical term until recently. I don't know why it's offensive. But yes, they don't have the same mental faculties as their peers, as they should. They can't speak. They hit themselves. They piss themselves. They can't feed themselves. Clearly, something is wrong. But on the upper end of the spectrum, these people who are just a little bit eccentric or just a little bit neurotic and intolerant, I don't think that's a disability. I don't think there's anything wrong with these people. That's just how they are as people. For example, so people trying to, and I even had a therapist once, surprisingly, not try to diagnose me with autism, but ADHD. So I've had my autism diagnosis revoked by another therapist. I did not pass any of the expectations that you would have for an autistic patient. I could do everything just fine. And with ADHD, well, yeah, that one shocked me, and I would love to know why that dickhead was so insistent. I went to this therapist. I got screwed over. I've talked about it in another video. I got screwed over so much by the therapist I went to after being hit by a car. I have PTSD, depression, all of that. But no, a lot of these therapists wouldn't even talk about it or focus on other things. And yeah, one of these guys, apparently he tries to diagnose everyone with ADHD. But, I am incredibly focused, disciplined, organized, hardworking, and he said, I must be ADHD. And so I'm going, I have a brother with ADHD. I know what it's like. I am nothing like him. Oh, it's a spectrum. But he wouldn't really explain, well, what symptoms am I displaying that's making you come to this conclusion? And, I've read through all the lists of symptoms of ADHD, and I don't see anything that I have. But that's what it's like now, that they're just throwing out these diagnoses willy-nilly. There is no real reason to do that. It was not going to help me in any particular way, and that's what I'm noticing too, is that these autism diagnoses and ADHD diagnoses are being thrown around in ways that don't really benefit the patient. And I've heard good therapists say, we don't jump directly to a diagnosis, because that tends to alter the patient's thinking. They start limiting their behavior. And I did that. Once I got the autism diagnosis, I remember my biological father said, well, it seems like you're worse since you got diagnosed. I went, no, of course not. But because I've been reading so much about autism that I suddenly decided, well, I guess those things are hard for me, and I don't have to try anymore. And TT Exelancic, she's a prominent voice in the D-trans community. She is autistic, and she has the same criticism that a lot of people are treating autism as this get-out-of-jail-free card, that you're allowed to be an arsehole and do whatever you want, and the rest of the world has to accommodate to your needs. And which is kind of the same as the transgender community, isn't it? The trans community will expect you to respect our pronouns and play along with my delusions, otherwise you're the bigot. You're seeing a little bit of an overlap between the autism and the trans community here. But yeah, she talks about how, well, the autism diagnosis seems to let a lot of people just get away with horrible behavior and not taking accountability for their actions. Oh, he can't help it, he's autistic. No, if you are, higher functioning, you are accountable for your actions. You can learn to integrate into society. It's that special snowflake syndrome, the whole trans thing, or being autistic or ADHD, where you go, oh, sorry, I didn't do something I'm expected to do as a functioning independent adult. But, you can't blame me because I'm neurodiverse or trans or whatever. That's the situation we're in now. So it's an incredibly narcissistic society, and we're enabling these narcissistic people. I've had my autism diagnosis revoked, but, well, did I ever really have it? So I have to go into my history with autism, which I've discussed in other videos, so I'll briefly summarize here. But I developed it completely normally in my early years. Childhood development markers, hit all of them, no issues, speech, motor skills, fine. In fact, I was correcting my teacher on her spelling in year 1. So a very intelligent child, but I had lots of friends. I was extroverted. There were no issues. And then on my 11th birthday, I got just a bout of gastro. Felt horrible, and my stomach was never the same after that. But then my personality started to change as well. And, it's around puberty, so becoming an angsty goth teen is kind of expected, so no one really thought anything of it. But I would have these weird neuroses. I became heliophobic. I would avoid the sun for some reason. I have all these OCD behaviors, and no one... Well, they either noticed but didn't say anything, or they just didn't think anything of it. And so primary school was fine, although towards the end it was a little difficult. High school was a nightmare. I didn't finish high school, struggled with everything, was getting into constant fights. And my mother was trying really hard to get me an autism diagnosis. And, well, so I've gone into my medical records, which is surprisingly patchy the further back you go. Because I was going to the same GP my entire childhood and before I was born. But they could only give me stuff going back as far as the age of about 10, which is, for my purposes, good. Everything is trucking along fine, and then suddenly it's my mother who is suggesting that I have autism. I don't know if she watched something on bloody Oprah or 60 Minutes or who knows what, but she was the one who was pushing this idea onto the doctor. So she went to our GP, and my GP made note of that, but in the note, he seems skeptical, because obviously he's known me since before I was born, and I have not shown any autism symptoms. Then my mum keeps coming back for referrals to different therapists. All those therapists say, no, she's eccentric, she's intelligent, she thinks outside of the box. I don't want to diagnose her with autism. It doesn't seem like she is autistic. And so my mum keeps going to different therapists, and finally she goes to the guy who diagnosed my middle brother with ADHD, and he happily gives me the autism diagnosis on the first session. And I will say that, so while we were doing that, so I was at the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts. I was doing costume design, which I really wanted to do at the time, and it was a very competitive environment, and I was struggling. And they were threatening to throw me out, so Mum was trying to get me the autism diagnosis to make things easier for me, so that he would cut me a bit of slack. And honestly, it did not help. It made things way worse, because this was horrible. So I was sent out of the room. The entire costume department had a meeting about me, without me there. And so they all treated me like a baby after that. And also, they weren't really taking into account my particular issues. They were just running through a stereotypical list of what autistic people struggle with. So suddenly I was getting all these written instructions instead of verbal instructions. And for me, I have always been, I used to read a lot, weirdly. I was an avid reader, not a fast reader, but I was an avid reader as a kid. And then from my teens onwards, I was a shit reader. I struggled to focus. After about a paragraph, I'm just, oh God, my brain's exhausted. I need to sleep. Reading definitely sends me to sleep, especially if it's in an environment with a lot of other things going on. If I'm in a classroom and other people are doing things, making noise, no chance. And now I have a traumatic brain injury, so reading is just... yeah, about it. I got to sort of like look sideways because that eye has issues. So I'm reading through one eye, and then I have to put my finger under every single word so I can and I got to say it out loud and say, nah. Audiobooks are the way to go now. So, did I have autism, or was this just Munchausen's by proxy? Well, something clearly changed quite dramatically neurologically when I was 11. But is that autism? I mean, some people have suggested it's PANS or PANDAS, which I don't seem to have those symptoms, but those are autism-like conditions that seem to arise due to a gut microbiome issue, and it can appear at any point of childhood. Possibly. Was my mum subjecting me to some Munchausen's by proxy? Also possibly. She, I think, has an anxious attachment style, especially after my father abandoned us, and so she tried very hard to control her kids and keep them close. And so my two brothers are still living with her, and yeah, she was very controlling of me and really only wanted me in the way that she wanted a daughter. She never really loved me. She loved the idea of a daughter, and having no other daughters, yeah, I had to be a very specific feminine image for her. So yes, there was, and I've talked about this in other videos, there's very much a history there of her controlling and dominating and engulfing my personality. And there's something about it's very toxic. That's why I've separated myself from my mother permanently. I don't know if I could ever be around her ever again because it's just so toxic. She's very controlling, and I do find myself losing my identity around her. And yeah, I definitely experienced that. So I don't know, is that my mother's personality and that's Munchausen by proxy, and she wanted me to have this autism diagnosis so that I would be more dependent on her, and it kind of keeps me in this arrested development, this childlike state. And to the end there, she was so insistent that I was autistic, even though, as I've said, well, I don't have any sensory issues, I don't have any social issues. My therapist has revoked my diagnosis. She doesn't see any symptoms. If this doesn't impact my life, and that's to say I am autistic, or as that other therapist wanted to suggest, that I have ADHD. Well, it doesn't impact my life in any particular way. No one can tell that I have these things. I don't have any disabilities. I don't have any struggles. So why call me neurodiverse? If anything, you can diagnose me as being artistic. I think that's really what it comes down to, is that artistic people, not autistic, artistic people tend to be weirdos. We're eclectic, we're eccentric, we have a different way of seeing the world. We have the shaman brain, which is this idea I've suggested in the past. We have this different way of perceiving the world, we have a different approach to things. And just the way I dress. For me, the way I dress is just normal and default. I'm not doing anything on purpose. Although, yeah, so today I'm kind of going for a subtle Rick O'Connell mummy look. But yeah, that's just, yeah, I've always loved dressing up in a kind of costume-inspired outfit. Doesn't mean I have autism, I'm just weird. I believe everyone struggles with social and sensory things from time to time. And with the ADHD, organization, focus, especially attention spans these days, everyone's saying they're going down the drain because of TikTok and stuff. These are not disabilities, and these are not insurmountable. I think when we pathologize these things, you're taking away the agency and the strength of the individual. They're saying, don't try, you can't change this, just accept the way you are. It's sort of, yes, it's good to accept yourself in a lot of cases, although weirdly the whole trans thing works in the opposite. So if you're autistic, Don't try to change that. Don't try to cure yourself. That's impossible. But if you're trans, by all means, take lots of drugs, mutilate yourself. So, do we embrace ourselves or do we not? I don't. Now, we don't really know what causes autism, but diet seems to have a noted impact. And a lot of this is fairly anecdotal because they don't want to study this. But for many years, I would read articles about parents who their child just suddenly changed their personality and they had all these issues they suddenly didn't have before, walking on their toes and they've forgotten how to speak and all that. And then they would put this child on a lactose-free or a gluten-free diet. And suddenly they've got their child back. The issues are gone. So clearly, there is a dietary component to this. And as a kid, I would eat whatever totally horrible crap, and I would be fine. Then, when I was 11, I had all these food intolerances, but we didn't know about FODMAPs, we didn't know about elimination diets. I was given all these really random diets that don't seem to make any sense. They were kind of contradictory. Especially not the high fiber diets. That was a bad idea. Human beings don't need fiber. But when I went carnivore, well, my digestive issues fixed themselves immediately. Basically, it was instant. And then over the coming months, I noticed all those sensory and social issues going away. And I was still taking testosterone, mind you. But I was saying to my friends, I don't think I have autism anymore. I went to a Christmas lunch with a friend and I was talking to her family members. No worries. There was lots of noise going on. I wasn't distracted. I was comfortable. I had a good time. Then although they were still saying, I don't know, I don't believe that. And it was like it was a bridge too far. At that point, yeah, I think I was identifying as a robot. They accepted the fact that I had this delusion that I was a robot. But the fact that I was saying at that point, I don't think I have autism anymore. I don't have the issues. I don't have the discomfort and the pain. All that's gone. I don't know, you still seem pretty autistic to me. And yeah, true enough, I've been very cringe throughout my life. But the secret is now, I am both base and cringe. And, well, at that point, I wasn't quite based yet. I was getting there, but I was very cringe. And yeah, it was just because I had lived with autism for so many years, you get socialized in a certain way, you get used to a certain way of thinking and behaving. And yeah, I was very childlike and naive, and I still didn't have emotions yet. Year after year from detransitioning, I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago now, I came into my own. I grew up. I let go of childish things, although... Look, they've brought back Monster High, and I really wanted the Yeti one, okay, and I'm going to customize it. But I don't have any more toys. I got some Metal Gear statues. They're statues and figurines and not action figures. So, yeah, you can have some neotenous, childlike traits here and there. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. But, yeah, I can see how much I've changed, and my thinking. There was many years where I had to grow up. A very late bloomer. From my perspective, I would say diet is a major aspect. We do see in these hunter-gatherer tribes, there's no autism, there's no ADHD, there's no depression. There's the brain energy, which I have already discussed in previous videos. But yeah, it's clearly metabolic. I'm going to say autism, ADHD, they are metabolic conditions. Fight me on it. But I do think if you change your diet, I mean, you look at, a lot of people who are autistic are a bit like Chris Chan. They spend all their time indoors on the computer thing. They don't socialize. They don't get enough sunshine. They don't exercise. They don't eat properly. No wonder they have these issues. But now I stand here on the other side of the neurodiverse spectrum. Now as a neurotypical, I can say very clearly why I thought I had to transition. And, obviously my other videos go into all the other factors, but purely focusing on autism. Why? I don't know, we get here about half an hour. Half an hour we get to the fucking point. I can translate for the autistic people. Why would they want to transition? And there's just a few factors. So I'm actually going to be referring to the Transgender Trend website. They did a long 80-page PDF on this. And yeah, I relate to a lot of it as well, so I can speak from personal experience that, well, number one, the major thing is that rigid black and white thinking. And so autistic people tend to see these gender stereotypes as literal and written in stone. Men are like this, women are like that. And so these kids will look at that and go, well, I don't identify with that. I just feel like me. Me is a little bit more like a boy, but I'm a girl. So maybe secretly I must be a boy. And further to that point, most autistic people aren't gender conforming. Most girls and women on the autism spectrum, they dress like tomboys, they have masculine interests, they tend to go into STEM fields, they are more scientifically and mathematically minded, and they tend to want to wear jeans, t-shirt, practical clothes, hoodies, and they like to have short hair, short nails, and so they therefore equate that to being a man. And then again, conversely, for autistic boys, they tend to be gentle and sensitive. They like soft, flowy, colorful, girly things. I don't know why, no one really knows why, but this seems to be a recurring trend amongst this community of individuals. Reason number 2 is hyperfixation. The internet is a drug for autistic people because it's this never-ending stream of information on their favorite topic. And for a lot of these autistic kids these days, it's not trains or video games or Warhammer. No, it's gender. And so these kids spend all day, every day on Tumblr or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and fixating on all the things that they lack if they were to become the opposite sex. So they want to... and this is another... I've mentioned in other videos. There's now this huge push to medically transition, where when I transitioned, it wasn't so much the case. Anyone could be trans. There was no right or wrong way. But I think it's these autistic kids watching these videos of these procedures and going, I need to do this. I need to get on this right now. And if they stop me, it's gatekeeping. And this is not another reason, but this is another, you'll see, this explains why the trans community is like this. So autistic people, they are histrionic, they have very poor emotional regulation, and they have poor social skills. So these kids are like, you're literally killing us, and it's gatekeeping, and you're transphobic, and yeah, all of that is because they're autistic. It's the whole trans thing. If it was, before the current wave of transsexuality, when it was just generally older men who are autogynephiles, going through this very long, slow process of transition, you didn't have this screechy, attention-seeking child thing going on. Because I believe, I have nothing to back that up, but yeah, maybe the autism, or maybe autistic people weren't the ones transitioning as much back then, I don't know. But the internet certainly gave them a very big, visible platform that they could screech all day on. And so, yeah, us neurotypical people are we feel like we're walking on eggshells, and we've got to be really respectful, and we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Whereas, when it comes to any kind of minority, disability, not autism, but other, physical disabilities or racial differences or religion, most people are able to discuss these things, or they have a bit of a sense of humor about it. They can take a little bit of misunderstanding. There's a bit more patience there. Whereas, no, because the trans community is primarily, I would argue, autistic individuals, it becomes histrionic. We know that currently 76% of referees to the Tavistock and Portman Gender Identity Services, GIDS, if you're not aware, are adolescent girls. And we also know from the Tavistock statistic that 48% either have a diagnosis of or show traits of autism. Although this is an astonishing number of young people sharing characteristics that are only seen usually in 1% of the population. Again, so it's a 48, nearly 50% of all these kids going through this transition are on the autism spectrum. And then I would argue the other percentage, well, either they're not diagnosed or they're gay. And so that's why they feel the gender dysphoria. Or there's a social contagion is another reason. And another reason would be loneliness, I think. So yeah, autistic people try very hard to fit in. They'll change the way they dress and act, and they often actually imitate sometimes cartoon, but fictional characters. They become hyperfixated on a fictional character and they want to become that character. So yeah, there's a lot of autistic people who, they love Doctor Who and they try to act like Doctor Who. I've seen so many autistic people behaving like Doctor Who, dressing like that, and yeah, so it's they're exploring identity, they're trying to fit in, and so that puts them particularly at risk of wanting to transition because they think, if I do that, people will love me, people will accept me finally. The other big reason, and this is one I can relate to, is alexithymia. So what's this reason number 4? We're up to alexithymia, which is this inability to understand your emotional and bodily sensations. And I think I still deal with that now, even though I have emotions. Boy, do I have emotions now. I deal with it all the time. I wish I didn't. I do just have these weird feelings. I feel wrong in my body. It's this disgust, discomfort. I don't even know how to explain it as an adult now. But yeah, especially as a kid, I would come up with all these different reasons, or I'd often imagine myself as fictional characters. I would struggle to visualize myself, and so always, as I've been told, I'm a really great model, and I think why I'm good at modeling, photographic modeling, is because I can see, or I can project my mind into, not literally, guys, not literal. But I can project my perspective into the camera. I can kind of see where I am, and okay, so the shadows would be here, so I need to face this way, and I'm really good at that mental modeling. But every once in a while, it may be stress, it's fatigue, I don't know. I can't see myself. And so when I can't see myself, I start seeing somebody else, and it's generally a character, let's say Big Boss in Metal Gear. If I've been playing Metal Gear, suddenly I'm seeing myself as Big Boss. And yeah, generally it is a male character that I will envision myself as. Or I kind of had this imaginary symbiote friend as a kid that I would, if I couldn't visualize myself, I would have visualized I had the Venom symbiote over me. I don't know what that is, but it was this sort of protection. Like I couldn't visualize myself, or I didn't feel comfortable or safe as myself, so I became someone else in my head. And I've never really heard anyone talk about it like that, but I have heard similar things from autistic individuals. And so yes, when you have that alexithymia, you can't make sense of your emotions, and your emotions happen in the body. So when you can't make sense of that, you start trying to come up with explanations, either retreating into a fantasy or deciding, this must be gender dysphoria. If I feel weird in my body, maybe I just don't like being a girl, or I don't like being a boy. For me, if I could be the parent to myself back then, I think what was really missing is, and this is what most kids, but especially autistic kids or intelligent kids, outsider kids, what they're lacking is an adult to take real genuine interest in their mental processes. Beyond just asking the kid, well, how was your day? Getting into those deep conversations of, well, how do you feel in your body? And what issues are you facing? How are you thinking, and how are you feeling about your daily experiences? And yeah, I know it's hard to do that. My family was broke my entire childhood. They hid it pretty well, but yeah, my parents were way too exhausted and stressed to really pay me the attention I needed and to talk me through what I was feeling. I mean, my parents were pretty NPC, so they would not have related to me or understood what I was going through. And that's the issue is I think autistic kids, or any weirdo kid, they need a very specific adult to communicate to them in a way that's going to be meaningful and helpful. And so I know if I could be the parent to myself, I really would have those long, deep conversations about how I felt in my own body, about the world, about my peers, about my future, and try to untangle those confusing bodily sensations. Because no one really talked about that. I just thought that was normal. And I mean, yeah, there is also the possibility that these kids will keep those things private because they don't understand that either it makes them weird or they suspect it will make them weird. There is no simple answer, but don't expose your kids to social media. That really helps. Although I have had mothers contacting me, it's never fathers. Well, once it was a father. But most of these mothers who contact me concerned about their child suddenly getting this rapid onset gender dysphoria, they've totally changed, and they say, well, actually, I didn't expose them to social media. They don't have any social media accounts. They don't do anything on the internet except for school stuff. I'm thinking, well, fuck, yeah. It's at that point now where it's everywhere in the schools. The schools are educating kids in gender dysphoria. So they're kind of implanting it in their heads. And if you are autistic and you are being given this information, you've got not a snowflake's hope in hell of not getting gender dysphoria, I would say. So autistic people are very intelligent, but a lot of them aren't. They don't have that savviness, that critical eye. So before I went carnivore, before I was red-pilled, I woke up. Yeah, I would look on government websites and just trust everything I read. I just trust it. Well, this is the information they provided, so therefore it's come from an authority, therefore it must be true. Whereas now, having detransitioned and I'm no longer autistic and having, just grown up, I have these emotions. I'm kind of thinking with the full range of the toolkit there. Yeah, I am much more suspicious and much more savvy. And I question all these things because I have the ability to scrutinize and understand that there are nefarious people out there with nefarious intentions. There are ulterior motives. Whereas, autistic people, if you're giving them this gender identity information in school, they're just going to absorb it and take it at face value. Now, while autistic people are generally of above average intelligence, as children, like all children, or maybe more so, they have an inability to understand the full context of their actions and the long-term impact. And so these kids who want to, I think most of them, these kids who want to transition are angsty, and they just want this instant gratification, this instant solution to their problem. And yeah, it affects all of them, but especially autistic kids. If you're a doctor and you're trying to get informed consent from A, a child, B, an autistic child, it's just not going to work. That is not ethical, and I don't know how anyone could sleep at night thinking that is. And here's a quote from Transgender Trend. The girls may identify someone who is socially successful and popular, either from her peers or a character in a television soap opera, and adopt that person's persona in mimicking speech patterns, phrases, body language, and even clothing and interests using a social script. She becomes someone else, someone who would be accepted and not recognized as different. Girls and women who have Asperger's syndromes can be like a chameleon, changing persona according to the situation, but no one knowing the genuine persona. She fears that the real person must remain secret because that person is defective. I know a lot of people who transition and their friends and family will say that it's like you suddenly become a different person and they put on this different character. For me, no, I felt free. I felt like I could truly be myself. But the only way to be myself was to become someone else. I know, it's confusing. Just bear with me here. So I had the freedom to cut my hair the way I wanted and dress the way I wanted, not wear makeup and jewelry and all those things. But then I felt that, I couldn't do that as Courtney, the woman. I had to be Connor, the man, to have that freedom. Ironic, really. In the book, Women from Another Planet, Our Lives in the Universe of Autism, Mary Margaret wrote of her experiences of gender and sex. My gender came into question. The boys would say, you aren't like the other girls. You don't cry when you get hurt, so you are better than other girls. But you aren't a boy, so you are a Mary Margaret. Of course, it was lonely being given a category to myself, and it taught me to hate my gender. It would take feminist readings many years later to move me out of my male-identified position. That's the scary thing, is not not just children, but especially autistic children, the line between fantasy and reality is malleable. And when you've got a bunch of adults standing around you saying, yep, you're totally going to turn into the opposite sex, egging you on, you're setting these kids up for failure and for a very painful future where they have to wake up to reality. And yeah, I did. And I transitioned in my early 20s, but I was delusional. And everyone around was feeding into that delusion. And I think that's another problem we find in this society today, that we can't... You know what? Bullying isn't so bad. You're not allowed to bully, you're not allowed to criticize, so you just let everyone do whatever weird shit they want. No, bullies actually played an important social role in society, where if you were doing something cringe, you would get punched for it, you'd stop. But now I know you can create your entire online persona on something incredibly insane and cringe, and then you'll have an OnlyFans, and what a world. I wish I lived in, I don't know, the 80s, the 90s. I think we peaked. I think The Matrix was right. That's why the simulation is 1999 forever. I think we peaked. And then 9/11 happened, and then it was all downhill from there. But there are so many risks of convincing these kids that they have become the opposite sex and that they've changed reality. So I'll read here. If an autistic girl believes she is neither male or female, she may assume, for example, that she is no longer at risk of becoming pregnant. Autistic young people may believe that their body is literally no longer either male or female, which may have health implications if they're living independently. Yeah, I see so many videos of these trans-identified women going, oh, somehow I got pregnant, oh no, and then a lot of them end up having the baby, and they go, I feel so masculine, I'm a dad with this big pregnant belly. You gotta be autistic. You don't have a sense of what reality is at all, do you, mate? It may also prove difficult if the child or young person believes that everyone around them sees them the way that they see themselves. That claim isn't substantiated scientifically anyway, but no, it is very true that their idea of reality is so fragile, and that they've been surrounded by enablers that, yeah, they will freak out when they're misgendered, because they're going, how did they know? I passed perfectly. And yeah, I was convinced that I passed when I did. Ironically, so I get confused for a man more now than when I was transgender, because I think I looked like a girl trying to be a man, even though my voice is very deep, and I like my deep voice. But now that I am a woman, well, I'm a butch woman, but I still have that deep voice, and I think that confuses people, where they think, oh, am I a man trying to be a woman? And I have been accused of being a trans woman many times, even though I'm only 5'3". I don't know how many... There aren't actually that many tiny trans women. They're all bloody 6'2" giants. And the article says OCD and anorexia have a lot of overlap with autism. And I mean, personally, I don't have either of those. But yeah, it's definitely very ritualistic, superstitious thinking. And this control of the body, this self-flagellation almost, inflicting pain through anorexia. And yeah, that would again be a red flag, and that practitioners should be looking at this. If you have an autistic child suddenly claiming that they are transgender, and then they have a history of other mental illnesses, OCD, anorexia, and none of this is looked into. It's just affirm. That's all they'll do. The most harmful thing, though, is gender dysphoria has been declassified as a mental illness, and therefore propelled many linked psychological conditions to be overlooked. And so that's what I was just saying, is if you are only looking at the gender dysphoria, not taking the holistic approach and looking at the whole issue that this person's dealing with, you're going to make misdiagnoses, and they should freaking know that. I mean, that's happened countless times throughout history for various reasons, not just transsexuality, but I mean, when it comes to people with, gut health issues. And a lot of doctors don't even look at, well, what are you eating? Oh no, here's just a bunch of drugs. Just take those. That'll fix the problem. Let's not question it. I guess reason number 6. I think I talked about 5 or 6 reasons. Yeah, reason 5. Puberty. Puberty is this huge change, and autistic kids do not handle change very well at all. So puberty blockers seem like this miracle. You can just put a pause button. You don't have to change. You can still stay the way you are. Change is scary. But we know, and I will probably do a deeper dive into puberty blockers, but it stunts not only physical development, but mental development. So these children will remain very childlike. You'll see this with Jazz Jennings, that he is in his 20s now, but the way he interacts with his peers is very childlike. And I mean, another reason is because he doesn't have a sexual drive. So in his idea of dating and marriage and stuff is very childlike and innocent. But yeah, he can't relate to his peers because of those puberty blockers. He hasn't gone through the same neurological development that is so crucial in your teen years. And a lot of these transgender kids also have helicopter parents. They were very much controlled and watched over their entire lives, so they haven't had that rebellious phase. I think a lot of these parents who allow their kids to transition, it's Munchausen's by proxy. It's child abuse. So these kids are not prepared for what is going to happen to them. And the article also says that autistic girls may struggle with managing their periods, wearing pads, wearing bras. So yeah, I mean, for boys, puberty is so easy. It's just the same but bigger, and hairier. But for girls, I mean, there's suddenly all these expectations, not just physically, but yes, you've got these breasts, and if you're unlucky to have big boobs, it's just, you suddenly got these huge burdens on you physically that may cause you physical pain. You have to wear a bra. I mean, thankfully, I got no tits, so I don't got to wear a bra. It's great. And yeah, having to deal with periods, I didn't struggle with that. It was annoying and it made me feel horrible, but no, I did all right. But I can understand if that is a sensory issue for a lot of autistic girls. That does make a lot of sense. But for me, and I've talked about this in other videos, that my struggle was just suddenly being forced to go from a girl, tomboy, just wearing whatever I want, doing whatever I wanted, and then suddenly my mum swooped in and went, okay, now you are my property. I'm going to make you into this pretty little Barbie doll. And it was very much like that. It was just plucking my eyebrows, removing all the body hair, forcing me into a whole different wardrobe, very feminine wardrobe, painting my nails, doing all this shit. That was just so, initially you think, oh, I'm bonding with my mum and getting all this attention. But I remember feeling physically sickened by the clothes I was put in. My aunt and uncle bought me a boob tube, this very tight-fitting black spandex boob tube, which was popular. Well, it's come back into fashion now, but sort of late 90s, early 2000s, very popular. And so I remember being given this gift, and I went into my room to try it on. And so this is maybe the first kind of suggestive garment I was ever. I was just wearing baggy t-shirts and jeans and whatever, being a tomboy. And so they buy me this tight-fitting thing that you can see my little breast buds through. And I looked in the mirror and go, oh, I feel sick. I feel physically sick. I don't like this. And so I took it off and went, oh, no, I don't like that. And I was really weirded out by it. And so that's an instance where I wish someone had kind of sat down with me and talked. So why did it seem to just, what was wrong with the clothing? And so, I think especially my mum being distracted and doing other things, just, oh, okay, she doesn't like it, whatever, I'll take it back. Not thinking deeper about it and wanting to understand the underlying psychology. Because, oh, yeah, the kid doesn't like the clothes. There's nothing deeper to it. Whereas, well, at least maybe I'm just more sensitive to it, and I think deeply about where I go, I want to talk to my daughter about that. There's something... Because I know, when I walked out of my room, maybe I was pale, I looked a little uncomfortable. I was clearly uncomfortable. Something wasn't right. But, my mum was she's oblivious. You can walk right up to her. If she's not looking directly, we could right up in her face. And she won't notice. She won't move out of the way. It's very, very embarrassing when I was walking in public with her. So people would be trying to get around my mum. Mum, move. So yeah, not having attentive parents. I would put that on reason number 6, or just ignorant parent. And I wanted to include this quote. It's just the cringe way that autistic kids, teenagers talk in a really cringe way anyway. But the way autistic teenagers think. This is a great quote here. Researcher Dr. Wen Lawson, who is both autistic and transgender, has carried out a tremendous body of research into female autism, and since transitioning has incorporated discussing gender identity into their work. In their presentation, Gender Dysphoria in Persons with Autism, Dr. Lawson quotes a young person who recently transitioned. Dr. Lawson quotes a young person, Drew, who describes their gender identity. I've recently been making exciting and very daunting discoveries about my gender. As a result, I currently identify as 30% George Clooney and 70% Georgina Clueless. I'm frankly researching all the posh names for where I'm at, and I'm guessing that I'm non-binary genderqueer with a degree of gender fluidity. It's not saying the same thing 3 times. Essentially, I live on planet Drew, which has an erratic rotation around the gender system. We're currently quite close to Venus. I'm an adult fan of Lego, a sci-fi geek, Doctor Who fan, and the occasional gamer. I've also discovered that I can do liquid eyeliner, which is nice. Fucking reminds me of Chris Chan. And Chris Chan is a great example of this autistic or transgender personality. It is very childlike. It has a very cheesy way of talking. And yeah, this whole thing of I'm non-binary and I'm trying to figure out my gender identity. It's all nonsense. It's all fantasy. But that's the thing, is that this kind of brain, this autistic brain, loves to get into fantasy and lore and lore. Sorry, I'm not American. Lore. Data and lore. But yeah, all of that information, the world building stuff that you would normally, they love the Dungeons and Dragons and the Warhammers and the Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars, because there's all of this information to absorb and all these rules and structures and all of that. And yeah, it's kind of, this whole trans movement is weaponizing that to say there's 50 different types, gotta catch them all, your gender identity and your sexual identity and your romantic identity, and there's all these different, they love that, those categories, that nice, simple rule book. And it is like Dungeons and Dragons having a rule book like that. And they will memorize that, and they will become experts on this. And so, yeah, it is purely a case of over-freaking thinking. Professor Tony Atwood, who stated as a rule of thumb, the emotional maturity of children with Asperger's syndrome is usually at least 3 years behind that of their peers. And that may be due to alexithymia. Yeah, no, I was definitely more than 3 years behind my peers. But, now, having gone through near-death experience and all that, I feel like I'm in my 50s now, honestly. I feel very jaded and tired of all of this shit. But very comfortable with my body. I'm not thinking about what's my gender and how people are going to think. I'm too fucking old. I don't give a shit. Now, there are 2 types of alexithymia, and I didn't know about that. Cognitive and affective. Cognitive alexithymia, and I wish it was alexithymia. It looks like it should be, right? Yeah. Cognitive alexithymia refers to the difficulty experienced when it comes to recognizing and naming how they feel, or recognizing emotions when they are expressed by other people. Affective alexithymia refers to impairment in imagining emotions and feelings and recognizing how emotions can make us physically feel or react. This is one reason why autistic children may not be aware that they are becoming overwhelmed by sounds, sights, crowds, or other stimuli that may eventually lead to a meltdown. Autistic vlogger YoSamDSam talks about alexithymia in her videos Demisexual Identifies and what's it like to not know how you feel. While describing her responses to dating and relationships, she talks about whether there is a link between alexithymia and sexuality, including how sexuality might be influenced by not being able to quickly label emotions or take longer than neurotypical people to decide whether there is a sexual attraction. And yeah, I think that might be why I was very confused when it came to my sexuality and why I thought it was asexual, because I just never felt that pull towards anyone. I never had those desires, those fantasies, so I never wanted to be touched even. And now, I mean, it took me a while to get a sense of, if you've never fallen in love before, you will go on a lot of dates and go, I mean, I like this person, I think. I mean, we're friends, but once that emotion, once love hits you, it hits you like a fucking truck. My love for you is like a truck berserker. Yeah. I have actually, tangent, I have been taking singing lessons, and I want to be able to do metal screams one day. It's because my voice is roughly in the same range as Chester Bennington of Linkin Park, and I've decided I could do that, actually. If I train to sing, I might just be able to do my own little Linkin Park cover band there. I don't know. We'll see. Stay tuned. For kids, and especially autistic kids and alexithymic kids, not knowing how they feel about others, I hear a lot of them saying, oh, well, I'm heteroromantic but homosexual, and all these really complicated categories, and it's just, you're overthinking things, you're imagining situations that you've never actually gone through. But when you actually start going out there and dating and having sex, you realize, oh, yeah, no, really, really not into that. But when it's all just abstract and theoretical. I've got a friend who, he says he's autistic or has ADHD, and he says, that he's, pansexual? This man is a virgin and has never dated anyone. And he's in his 40s. It's like, mate, jumping the gun there, try to get out there. Here's reason number 6, 7, I don't know. We're not counting anymore. I can't remember. Interoception. Interoception is not something I heard about until I read How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. I don't know why I always remember that, but I do. And she talked about how emotions originate in the body, and a lot of people have quite a negative emotional reaction to her talks, because people will come up to her and say, oh, how dare you, I had a stillbirth, or I lost a child, or I lost my husband, and you're saying my emotions aren't real. No, that's not what she was saying. What she's saying is emotions fundamentally start in the body. There's about 4 different states that the body can be in. So there is positive and negative valence, and you can be excited or calm. And so you're kind of a cross between one of two of these 4 things at a time. So let's say you have you are aroused, you are excited, you're in an excited or aroused state. But is that a positive valence or negative? So if it's a positive valence, you're excited, you're looking forward to something that's about to happen. You have negative valence, you're anxious, you're frightened about something that's about to happen. But you can hack into that, because if you go, well, I've got this, I'm in an excited state. Well, am I actually excited or am I anxious? Well, you can kind of meditate and convince yourself, no, I'm looking forward to this. I'm so excited. Can't wait to get on stage and talk in public or whatever it is. So your emotions are not, and this is another thing relating to autism, relating to the whole trans thing, that we live in a society now that puts so much emphasis on how valid and important your emotions are, and they're set in stone, and we've got to honor them. No, your emotions, we are dumb, naked monkeys, basically, and we have these instincts, and we have these, reactions, these gut reactions to things, but we have the higher functioning to step back and go, okay, I'm feeling stressed, but I can breathe through it, and we can negotiate, and we can be civilized. But yeah, if we are pure we are pure emotion, it doesn't lead to good things. Research has linked low levels of interoception with autism. If an autistic child struggles with the ability to decode the internal messages sent by his or her body to their brain, as well as an inability to label emotions, then a situation is created when they can be profoundly disconnected from their own body. And yeah, well, at one point I believed I was a robot, and it's because I couldn't feel. I didn't understand what I was going through, and also because I've been through a lot of traumas, but back then, yeah, I think my dad leaving me and my mother's sudden flip in personality and becoming very controlling and abusive, that was trauma, but I just went numb. I wasn't aware of what was going on, or not facing the severity of the situation. When my father left, back then, I didn't feel anything. It's like, oh, thank God he's gone. Good riddance. Less stress around here. Whereas now as an adult, I know that's seriously impacted me. I have abandonment issues. I can lean towards an anxious attachment. I wouldn't say full on anxious attachment. I'm fine being alone. I have my own personality and identity now, but I think back then, when I started modeling myself on my mother and then going through the transgender thing, my sense of identity was really skewed. And then I would just go numb and just do whatever my mum wanted, just bury my emotions way down and just become this robot slave for her. I created, it was like a game or this role play that I was doing in my head of, I am her android slave, she can scream at me and do whatever she wants, I am a robot, I don't feel. And then I think over time that just got worse and worse, so I literally believed it. And especially taking testosterone, that I was going into a psychosis. Oh, and before we move on, I don't think I made a video on the whole android delusion on its own, but yeah, it got to a point where it was so severe that I was struggling to eat, to swallow food, to clean myself, because every physical sensation was disgusting to me. I was disgusted by having to eat or go to the toilet or any of those things, which is very distressing and alarming, and no one was really intervening. And I went to go get help, and my therapist, said, "Oh, I don't believe in conversion therapy, so I'm going to encourage you to embrace your robot identity." No, she should have her license revoked. That is disgusting. That, I'm developing an eating disorder. I'm struggling to care for myself because I have, my brain and body don't really talk to each other anymore, and I'm misinterpreting every incoming signal as a threat or as disgusting. Here's another, it's not a reason, but a factor in transitioning, especially for autistic girls. So when they transition, they wear a binder, of course, that straps down their breasts. And that feels great for them because autistic people love pressure. You've probably heard of the Temple Grandin hug box or hug machine, which puts pressure on their body. And so it's calming, it's relieving. And so the binder helps with that. And also, because it's hiding a prominent sexual dimorphic feature, it kind of puts into their head, oh, see, I'm definitely trans, because obviously my breasts are the thing causing the dysphoria. No, it's just you're going through puberty, you're not used to having something there. It feels different, so now you're strapping it down and putting pressure so you feel comfortable. Sorry, guys, I'm grabbing my tits. The transgender trend article goes on with the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum, as defined by Brenda Smith Miles, refers to all the social information that we are not formally taught, but we absorb or learn by watching the people around us. Autistic children often miss the sort of information that their peers would pick up via process of implicit learning, as they find it hard to interpret or to contextualize. This can cause difficulty when it comes to gendered behavior, which is often learned this way. Neurotypical girls learn more easily how to display the behaviors and appearance that are socially sanctioned by adolescent females. They learn that femininity is a uniform that they're expected to adopt, although they may do so to varying degrees, and some reject it altogether. This process has become pathologized, with degrees of masculinity and femininity now labeled on a new spectrum of genderqueer identities. However, autism can hinder the social understanding necessary to make this jump from androgynous prepubescent to successfully constructed gender presentation, and girls may confuse their struggle to read these social cues with cross-gender identification. If I am not feminine, then I must be masculine. Another factor they believe plays a part is communication. Autistic children learn how the world works by studying information that we place in it. And if that information tells them that if they hate their periods, or if they want to wear a binder or play football, that they may actually be a boy, they may accept it as fact. As children, they haven't yet learned the critical thinking skills needed to make decisions about whether information is true or relevant to them. they may never master this skill, which is why the way that we communicate with them is so vital to their well-being. And as I was saying, we don't have parents and teachers who really know how to communicate with an autistic child. Autistic children may not have the confidence to talk openly about their body or about feelings that they can't easily identify. They can struggle to accurately describe what is happening to them. The desire to fit in and find a tribe to belong to is a powerful driver and may lead them to mimicking behaviors to facilitate in a way and say the right thing even if it wasn't what they want. It is vital to remember that autistic children may not understand that they cannot control how they're perceived by others. This can lead to distress and may lead the child or young person to label these responses, such as misgendering, as transphobic, because this is the message that they are receiving from the community surrounding them. Autistics don't have the same relationship with reality that NTs, neurotypicals, do. Again, look at Chris Chan. He's severely delusional. And I've watched the Gino Samuel Chris Chan documentary. I am fascinated. It's like it's like the best true crime documentary I've ever seen. And yeah, it's given me some great insights into autism and myself in the past, scarily enough. But yeah, falling into that delusional thinking, and there's no one correcting him. If anything, he's surrounded by enablers. And yeah, I get it. I can relate that I don't know what it is. It's just you create this fantasy for yourself, and you just start to believe it if you say it often enough. I don't know. And in terms of how autistic children communicate, some therapists ask open questions in order to give the child time to access their thoughts and feelings about a given issue. This may be a difficult style of work for an autistic child to manage. Indirect questioning may simply cause confusion, and an autistic child may not know what information is required and ends up saying nothing. There needs to be space for them to process what they are being asked. There can be a 2 or 3 minute delay in processing information, and so it may not be apparent that the child has misunderstood something or answered the wrong question until later on. It is vital that adults allow them time to process what has been said and then check back that they have understood and decoded the correct information. All my report cards said that Courtney needs to ask more questions, and I'd say, well, but I didn't have any questions. What would I say? I thought I understood everything. So, I don't know, maybe that is an autism thing, but I mean, that goes way back. From my earliest report cards would say Courtney needs to ask more questions, which implies that I seem to not have understood something, whereas, yeah, I always think I understand. I always assume. I think everyone does. Is that not a typical cognitive bias? That we presume our way of perceiving the thing is therefore the truth. Because it's not like I'm sitting there in class going, I'm confused, I don't get. I think it's this. It's definitely this, and I don't question that at all. Now I don't seem to have that issue. So yeah, in my teens and in my 20s, it felt like things were just happening around me spontaneously. The rules were just shifting all the time, and I'd be doing my work, and then I'd hand it in, and they go, "You haven't done anything right. You haven't done this, that, and that." What? When did you change this? Well, if you had questions, you should have said, I thought I was supposed to do it this way. That's how you said it was supposed to be done. I have done the thing that you asked. That's where informed consent, trying to get informed consent out of a child, as I've said before, is already really difficult. But getting informed consent out of an autistic child who may take a long time to actually understand these things properly, that's insane. So that basically covers all the major reasons I can think of why transitioning is so appealing to autistic people. And it's a lot of the mentality between both cults that are the same. And I can see that I think the autism mentality just fed into the trans mentality, where the trans community wasn't like this for most of history. And then all of a sudden you have this histrionics getting in there, and this very unreasonable, childlike, simplistic way of viewing sex and gender and how it affects other people in society. brushing women's rights to the side so that the trans people can do whatever they want. It all makes sense. Viewed from this perspective, I think it makes a huge amount of sense why the trans community behaves the way it does, which seems to defy all logic and reason, and why it is so petulant. And until next time, see you, Space Cowboy.